Okay. Alright, let's go ahead and go to Sumerian. Ah, bollocks. And of course the portal's down. It's gotta be something every day. While the portal's broken, let me go to slideshow. No. Okay. Can I... do that? Let me see. Okay. Hopefully that's correct. Hold on. Make sure this is the correct glass. Yeah. Okay. Um... Now, is there a way for me to... I guess I can just do this. Like I've been doing. Come on, computer. Wake up. Come on, computer. Oh god, that's gonna be weird. Okay. Yes, okay, I know that doesn't work. Great. Alright. I've got it working this time. I know what I screwed up last time, so... Cheers. Close that. Oh good, it's buffering. It's buffering in my like, I've got my upload window up, my stream window, and it's doing worse than my window that's actually showing me what you guys should be seeing. Not that there's anybody here, according to this. Alright, I'm gonna give this a minute. Comment in the chat when if you have questions. I don't know if I can do anything extra with that. Oh, Lordy. Okay. Again, I meant to start up a little bit earlier than this, but it's been a thing. Cool. Yes. No. I should order Moe's today. Okay. We're just gonna go ahead and get started. Hopefully people are gonna start showing up. I'm kind of getting tired of teaching this one with nobody here. The first day was my fault. I gave the wrong excuse me, the wrong URL. Granted, let me make sure that my voice is coming through. Boop, boop. Yeah, okay. Granted, I didn't know what I was doing with YouTube streaming, so I mean, I don't know. I wasn't sure how to do the whole URL thing. I've done Twitch before, and the URL is always the same. It's like, hey, here's your Twitch stream. Go here. But I don't think Twitch is for gaming, and they'll allow, their big streamers to have like crafting and things that isn't quite gaming, but I don't think they would just allow me to stream my PowerPoints, even if I am, an educator. So that's why we're doing it here. Anyway, nobody's here. Yay. All right. Well, as we mentioned last time, I mean, I'm just waking up myself, so that's fair. And of course, I'm getting attacked immediately. In 1875, Europeans controlled 11%. By 1890, it was 90% because the Europeans had the technological advantage, as I had mentioned. The quinine tablets being the main one, just the whole, hey, we don't die from being here. Uh, However, this led to a lot of resistance. Ethiopia, they actually kicked out the Italian army, um, or actually, they just stopped the army entirely in Adwa. Um, in the German controlled states, they were a bit more aggressive. Maji uprising was crushed, but took 2 years. Southwestern Africa, the Herero. Um, let's see. Uh, Captured several German settlements. So in turn, they killed 50,000 here, men, women, and children. Drove the rest into the desert. Poisoned their wells. In the end, 80,000 died. 20,000 Nama, which was a neighboring tribe, were also killed, and it amounted to genocide. So, you know, that's a great way to start your expansion in Africa. We already had the awful uh, visual images there, which is what happens, as I said, when you put people in concentration camps. The sanitary conditions are terrible. They typically are underfed. And when we say concentration camp, people are like, "Oh yeah, the the death camps in World War II," and it's not necessarily that, but still putting people in concentrated camps is gonna kill people, just plain and simple. And hopefully, the mute on this thing works. If not, I apologize to anyone who's actually here. Right, the Boxer Rebellion, which I was going to try to get to last time, but I figure it's worth talking about enough that I hold off. Let me grab my book. Do 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 do. Is it stuck on this page? Because that's where the cow was laying. Ba 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 ba. Oh, what a bloody surprise! Uh, Mount Everest was named after a British surveyor. Huh. Of course, it was British. Some British dude going out and exploring. Okay. So, within China, uh, the people there, the native population, were angry and wanting to get rid of the Europeans who were taking advantage of them. So the Qing Empire tried to modernize like Japan to throw off the Europeans. As we have seen, it took Japan just a couple of decades to go from basically medieval to like a modern nation. uh, but in the Sino-Japanese War of 1895 and 1896, the Japanese beat the crap out of China, and the Germans and British took advantage and sought more concessions because they were there and they felt like they could. I mean, that's been the whole the whole thing this time is just getting more stuff from China. So nationalists felt like the king court was the enemy because they were having to make these concessions with foreign powers rather than lose control entirely. So they began rallying behind secret martial arts societies. The Society of Righteous and Harmonious Fists are boxers because Europeans are dumb and think, oh, they're fighting with their hands, therefore they must be boxers. That's why it's called the Boxer Rebellion. Not because they were literally, boxers, but because they were fighting with their hands, and Europeans only understand fighting with their hands as boxing. Um, So they began a grassroots resistance movement, attacked missionaries and foreigners, cut telegraph lines and railroads. The Boxer Rebellion, it's like 2 paragraphs in the book, and it's quite irritating. Um, it's it was a massive issue for China. Uh, Within a few years, the Qing Empire had actually completely lost control of this rebellion. And that they would have essentially overthrown the empire, and I don't know what they would have done, but they would have done something different. It would have been some different nationalist government, or at least they would have forced a change within the empire because the Qing Empire couldn't just put them down. So the foreign powers, Russia, Japan, Germany, Britain, France, and the U.S., sent in troops, and once they crushed said rebellion, they ordered the Chinese to make payments, because of course they did. So the major treaty ports, as you can see, they're basically all on the coast and then well up the river. And then the major area of the Boxer Rebellion is all around the big ports here. Now, Korea was basically part of China at the time. And then, again, as you can see, went to Japan in 1895 after the Sino-Japanese War. I guess a main reason the European powers got involved is because they liked their deals with China, and they felt like if the government got overthrown, it might harm their standing there, and they wanted to hold on to it. So, of course. Do I have? Oh yeah, I've got. Now these boxers, weren't just going out and hitting people with their fists. They were using swords, and they of course had guns as well. But the main thing they had was the support of the countryside, the support of the people, and in a place like China, that translates to hundreds of thousands. Just immediately. You look at the map and it's like, okay, well, it's only a small part of China, right? But like this area is bigger than the main island of Japan. Hell, I think if you take that area and split it up, it might be as big as Japan. Um, and it includes Beijing. And I mean, it doesn't go as far down as Nanking, so which was the capital at the time. But this is some densely populated areas. I mean, it's got a major river running through it, so this is a lot of people. I mean, the whole place is a lot of people, but this isn't a small thing. I mean, like I said, I read a lot of primary source information about it, and it was essentially, a lot of people on the other side of the war, the King Empire people were like, this is it. This is the end. We can't beat these people. Now, obviously, when the foreign powers came in and were putting this down, they took care of things the way they saw fit. Uh, the Japanese, especially, who, as I may have mentioned, have been fighting the Chinese since the world was young. Uh, Particularly enjoyed executing the the rebels. So here we have a man about to be probably decapitated over this grave, and then here we have right in the middle of the street, as one does. At least it looks like it's the middle of the street. There's buildings in the background. So yeah, the Boxer Rebellion was really rough, and like I said, it's kind of a shame that we don't get to talk about it more. But there's so much to talk about. I guess it's fair. Speaking of the Boer War, now we're only really going to talk about the second one, um, because the first one was just, hey, the British wanted to annex the Transvaal region where the Dutch were. Okay, actually, we got to take a step back beyond that. So, the British were in South Africa, and north of that, um, were the Boers, which were Dutch settlers who had landed there a number of generations before, um, and had assimilated isn't the right word because they definitely didn't assimilate into the culture, but they kind of created their own culture, uh, and actually had a different uh, language, Afrikaans, two A's, Afrikaans, I believe is how it's spelled. Doesn't matter. You guys don't have to. I mean, doesn't matter. Anyway, um, so they when the British created a Cape Colony, the Boers moved north into the Transvaal region, which means beyond the Vaal, which is the Vaal River. Um, and things were mostly okay for a while until diamonds were found in Transvaal. So the British were like, we should we should try and and take that. So they did, or they attempted, but they were pushed back, as we said, in 1877, or rather, 1880 to 1881, in the First Boer War. So, unlike with China, with the whole Opium Wars, the Boers put up a fight. Um, but obviously the British still wanted those diamonds. But also Cecil Rhodes, the Prime Minister of Britain's Cape Colony at the time, wanted access to these lands so he could work on that railroad we had mentioned before. Because you need to go north through that land anyway to try and get all the way up to Egypt. This was barring the whole fact that Germany was in the way anyway, so whatever. So the Prime Minister of the Cape Colony, the guy in charge of South Africa, she does not realize I'm doing this. Ba, 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 ba. Anyway, he sent his friend Leander Starr Jameson, what a name, to incite rebellion in the Transvaal by sending raiders over the border. It was, I don't remember exactly what the argument was there. Like, they'd send the raiders over. Here we go. Yeah, send raiders over to spark an uprising, and then South Africa and Britons could go in and say, "Oh, we're going to help you, but now we're going to take the area over because that's how Britain rolls." However, the Dutch, or the Boers there rather, realized what was going on, and needless to say, no rebellion was incited. However, there was finally war in 1899. Now, there's a number of things. I mean, it goes on for like really the rest of the chapter almost. So it was a disastrous war for the British. Because the popularity of the profitability of the press and the speed of the communications, it was the most intensely covered and best illustrated war to date because they didn't yet really understand how. I shouldn't say they didn't understand how morale worked because, we've understood that since cavemen. But they didn't understand that just sending back exactly what was going on to the people, to the civilians, wouldn't cause a swell of support for the war necessarily. It's very amusing if you're familiar with old Winston Churchill from World War II. He's great. Winston Churchill wasn't a terribly good person, but he was the person that Britain needed in World War II, and I like him for that. And seeing him as, like, he looked like me. Like, he was scrawny and gangly, and he had a hat that was too big for him. I guess that's not possible for me. But, no, it was great. But he went to South Africa as a reporter and then ended up joining the fighting because, rah, 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 Britain. So the Second World War wasn't this clean, civilized war that everyone was expecting, where they all line up and shoot at each other. Uh, the Boers realizing that they couldn't fight a stand-up war with the British, uh, waged a guerrilla war. So they retreated to the countryside, destroyed supplies, hid among the populace, which caused more issues. So the British would round up I said natives, that's actually not a proper term. I'll talk about that in a minute. Um, oh, well, one of these guys founded the Boy Scouts. Um, right. They rounded up the civilians, burned crops, put them into camps, that sort of thing. But the thing about this, the reason why it was a problem for sending it back to the British well, we'll get that in a minute too. I've got pictures. So here's the region. You've got Cape Colony, Cape Town. That's just what will eventually become South Africa. Um, and then the Buchanland, and then Rhodesia up north. So, okay, I guess they didn't have to go through it. They're just being assholes. The Orange Free State was before Transvaal, and then Transvaal. But yeah, that's where they discovered lots of diamonds. I'm trying to remember if that was where they discovered the Hope Diamond. That's like literally like this big. Um, it was discovered when there were some children kicking around a rock, um, and some dirt flaked off, and I guess it was a British or maybe a Dutch. No, it was British because the British have it because they're assholes. Um, the explorer was there and was like, "Hey, let me see that rock of yours," and wiped it off. It's like, holy shit, this is a diamond. Uh, so that was the thing. So here are some Boer guerrilla fighters out in the scrublands. Again, to me, this looks like it could be in Australia. Uh, the thing about, I mean, they're even dressed like, they could be Australians with the floppy hats and the bandoliers and everything. Um, the thing about why this was such a problem. Oh, there he is. There's little Winston Churchill. I love it. I'm so glad I got a picture of little Winston Churchill. There he is. Oh my god. Okay, so the reason this was an issue for the British population is these were the pictures they were getting back. These were the concentration camps. These white European looking women and children stuffed into camps, which was a problem suddenly because 19th century Europe. These people look like us and our neighbors and our children, and this isn't good. Uh, so and this would be where if we were actually in class, I would have said, "Hey, why was this a problem for Britain?" And nobody would be awake and would look at me like I was, a lizard man. Uh, but the obvious answer, because these people are white. That's plain and simple. The British saw this war as a problem because we were doing to people that looked like them what the Europeans had been doing to Africans and Asians and Native Americans for a long time. And now suddenly it was a problem. Now, Europeans fighting Europeans wasn't anything new, obviously. But the concentration camps, I mean, because, that's fine. Fighting these guys, whatever, no big deal. But burning the crops and putting them in camps and, the civilians, that was, uncalled for the British. All right, so this colonization and the resistance changed the shape of the world. North America, Australia, China, Africa, every part of the world was touched by this expansion. We don't talk a lot about South America in this. I guess because it really got it mostly got colonized by the Spanish and the Portuguese, and we don't talk a lot about Spanish and Portuguese. There's a big Hispanic, they just don't talk about it. I mean, there's a in at Francis Marion they have a whole Latin America history course, so that's a separate thing. But yeah, anyway. Well, I say we. I mean, this particular book doesn't talk about it. I'm sure some other ones that some of the other professors might use might talk about it more. But anyway, um, as we said, the exhaustion of the European Napoleonic Wars led the Europeans not to want another war on the continent, um, and a lot of the countries were broken and in need of new markets. Uh, and also, this increase in technology made expansion possible even into sub-Saharan Africa. Of course, though, for the natives, this expansion was just invasion. Laws, customs, traditions were overridden for the Europeans that wanted them to work for their profit, while the people suffered and starved. So, obviously, they were going to resist, as one would. Okay, so I'm going to see if I can make this. Why is it a blur in the middle? I'm gonna see if I can make this. But that's just the sunlight on my shirt. If I can make this switch over to my other PowerPoint, so let's find out together, shall we? Okay, it switched over on my thing. Will it switch over on YouTube? Ha! Victory. Okay. Well, uh, that's good. Oh, browse as an individual for window. Great, excellent. Well, on to this one then. This is chapter 21, Crisis of Liberalism, the Making of Mass Society. And this will actually lead us directly into World War One. So, this is the shift in, well, we're going to look at hyper-nationalism. That becomes a major problem. Second Industrial Revolution, mass culture, mass politics, and we'll see how that affects society. So, on to this. Normally I'd ask if anybody has any questions, but again, I don't know if anybody's actually in here, so we'll move on. Uh, oh, bloody hell! This is a French term that I can't say. Fin de siecle. Fin de sec. I don't know how much of it is, not even pronounced because French. So the 19th century was coming to an end. The public at large believed that this would be a time of great change. Great things would happen, and there would be a clean break with the past. Now, I have words about that, but we'll get into that as the chapter continues. But 1900, things were changing, but the big cultural change doesn't come until 1918. So now there were changes, as I said. This was I'm not poo-pooing this. Banking, voting, technology, social structures. Many people in lower parts of society had hope for a better tomorrow, while those at the top, of course, were fearing for a radical shakeup of what they had. How dare the people who don't have all the power want some power? This began in the 1870s. Europe was adjusting to the new power whale that was Germany, and new technologies. In 1876, saw the four-stroke gas engine in the telephone and the incandescent lamp in 1879. So this was some major changes. Now, internal combustion engines have been a thing for a long time. Internal combustion engines that worked were a lot more recent. There was technically an internal combustion engine in the Renaissance. And again, this would be when I would say, "Hey, can you guys guess what it used as its fuel source?" And you'd all look at me like I was a lizard man. It used gunpowder. Now, needless to say, it wasn't an engine like what you'd have in a car. It was just kind of a cylinder with a tube with a piston in it, and you pour the gunpowder in it and lit it, and it would, burst. Was prone to failure and danger to people. But the four-stroke gas engine, had the mix of air and gas, and made it reliable. The telephone, we know what the telephone is, I hope, or at least what it was in 1876, rather than what it is now. The incandescent lamp, so another big change away from the gas lighting. Now you've got electrical lighting, which still took a while to catch on. Now, again, electricity, the idea of light bulbs, it's like, oh, Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, but then everybody had light bulbs. It took a long time. I mean, it was the Great Depression before a lot of people in the Tennessee River Valley had electricity, and that was because of an initiative to put people to work. We'll talk about that, hopefully, before the end of the semester. So, that's a whole thing. Oops. Just going to give a little bit longer on that. So, yeah. Some major changes as we're getting towards the end of the 1800s. we'll talk a bit about each of these. Excuse me, a bit more. So technology increased, prices fell, wages rose. So Europeans had more ability to move around. Between 1871 and 1891, 27.6 million Europeans immigrated outside of Europe, creating a Caucasian tsunami. That's the best word. Um, Around this time, though, there were fewer German and Irish involved, more coming from Italy and Scotland. There were waves of immigrants coming out of Europe. I did that in a different class. I get my classes mixed up at this point. Now, obviously, many went to the United States because that's the ones that we learn about because we're very selfish about history. It's like we should only learn about the United States and not anywhere else because why would that matter to us? Um, Now, some, like Joseph Pulitzer, made it. Obviously, he was well, you guys may have heard of the Pulitzer Prize, but that's due to, like, newspapers. He made his fortune in newspapers. Many more lived and died in slums, working for starvation level wages because, the American dream is not for everybody. Which is, and I'm not to say that, hey, don't come here, the American dream isn't for you. I mean, just coming here and working hard doesn't mean you're going to make it. It's a roll of the dice. Uh, Now again, the U.S. wasn't the only country that was involved in this. 4.5 million Europeans moved to Argentina. Argentina's, I don't want to say strange, but it's one I don't think about. And again, that's just because I don't know much about South America. I'll I'll sit here and say that I don't know much about South America. Um, 4.6 moved to Canada. 2 million moved to Australia and New Zealand. 1.5 million moved to Africa. And 2 million Russians moved west to the Siberian hinterlands. Um, why west? It should be east. Moved east to the Siberian hinterlands. Don't know why you'd want to do that, but sure, move to Siberia. It's actually my Italian friend and I uh, were doing I guess it's sort of a D&D thing, and she just sort of randomly created a character from Argentina, and I was just doing a little research into Argentina, just for the sake of helping her with the background. And it's like, hey, there's actually a really large percentage of Italian immigrants from there. So nice. Like I didn't realize that. I just sort of picked it at random. So so again, Argentina, it's still a little bit weird because I don't think about South America, but now after that sort of personal anecdote, when I see Argentina, I'm like, oh yeah, there's a lot of at least Italians there. There's also a country in South America where uh, I know a lot of Confederate soldiers like ran off to after the Civil War, and so there's like a region. I don't know if it's Argentina. It might be Brazil, but there's a region in one of these South American countries that's like a state here in the South. Like it's fried chicken and uh like they've got the accent and all, it's weird. Like I think they've even got, the sort of the plantation house buildings and stuff. Um, yeah, it's a whole thing. Like, oh, we're political refugees, and they're like, yeah, sure, whatever. I have to find that again. That was actually one of my students from the last college I went to. It's like, hey, did you hear about this? Like, I don't know anything about this. Please tell me more. And he stuck around after class, and we looked it up, and it was amazing. Um, but anyway, here's Joseph Pulitzer with his glasses without any like arms. I don't know how that happens. It must be like really strong on the bridge of the nose there, which would give me a headache. Here's a map that's at a weird angle. It's from the north down, which I feel like is probably, well, no, it's not fair to Australia. Sorry, Australia and New Zealand, which is not on the map. What do you want? Showing the roots of immigration. Um, a lot of folks moving out, and it's actually okay. Yeah, I was gonna say it's not showing the Europeans. Yeah, there's the Europeans, the blue lines, but also a fair few from China, India, and Africa as well. But just following the blue, a fair number to the United States, some to Hawaii as well. Actually, everybody seems to have sent a group to Hawaii. Uh, let's see. Yeah, there's South America, so yeah, there's Argentina down there. South Africa, so that would be just more British, probably. Well, no, that's kind of from Spain. Well, I don't know if where it's coming from on the thing matters. Australia and New Zealand, of course. Well, that one's coming from Britain for sure. Yeah, so North America, or U.S. and Canada. So yeah, good stuff. Now, while there was movement out of Europe, there was actually an even greater movement within Europe. Uh, from the countryside to the cities. The cities were now becoming proper metropolises. The cities we had been talking about since the beginning of the chapter, since the beginning of the semester, rather, were towns at best. Uh, but now that we've got these these new technologies, these jobs that are now in the cities, everybody's moving into the cities. London was especially affected. Bleh. These big populations increased the speed at which mechanization and mass society progressed. Um, so yeah, these urban centers grew quite quickly. Bathtubs, electricity, and telephones were restricted to the upper classes. So, like I said, hey, these things exist. Not everybody has them. Because, it's like, hey, yachts exist. Need I say more? The lower classes were in the disease-ridden slums, because of course they were. But public works made things a little more bearable for them. Mass transit, though, was the big thing. So people could live further away from the city and further away from all the disease. But basically, the thing about mass transit, because again, cars existed sort of. Well, by the London Underground, not yet. But A, they were very expensive, so of course only the rich could have them. And the infrastructure for cars wasn't really there yet. There weren't especially good roads yet. Uh, so travel was restricted to basically walking. I mean, yeah, there were carriages and stuff, but again, if you were poor, you didn't really have that. But with mass transit, subway, that was something that most people could afford. And also, if you had mass transit radiating away from a city, you could live outside of the city, not on top of each other, which meant that cut down on disease, and also more people could now work in the city without living directly in the city. So you had like commuting for the first time. I mean, I should say for the first time, but like mass commuting. So the London Underground was the first subway system, and it carried 30,000 people on its opening day in 1863. That's substantial. Like, yeah, 30,000 people on a subway today is probably like in the amount of time it took me to pause for the whole system. But for the opening day in a system that had just been invented, that's incredible. So yeah, here's the roads at the time. Like I said, there were carriages and stuff. Most people just walked, and we'll have to talk about this. Did we? No, did we talk about this? Well, that's a different class, isn't it? Oh, that's lame. I want to talk about. Well, we'll talk about this now. And again, if there was actually anybody here, I'd be like, hey, why would lots of carriages be a problem? Because you have to have horses to pull the carriages. And while, horses aren't spewing, well, I mean, they fart, so there's methane, but that's not that big of an issue. But the thing is, horses poop a lot, and they pee a lot, and the roads didn't have quite the drainage systems they have today. So, like, when it rained, it would start to move this stuff around, and it was bad, y'all. I've got pictures somewhere, probably not in this book, or in this PowerPoint, or in these sets of PowerPoints, but I mean, it looks like, oh wow, there was like a mudslide. Nah, I mean, there's literally a carriage stuck up to its axle in not mud. This is Vienna, I believe shortly before World War One. As you can see, once again, still packed with the people walking around, but now you've got a line of cars trying to get down the middle of the road, but only really going one way. So there they are building the London Underground. That's the borehole there. Now, this is a modern picture because you can see people have their bloody smartphones. Nobody's got a damn regular camera anymore. This was the 100-year anniversary. Yeah. Our 150-year anniversary. 8, 9, something like that. 1881. Yeah, so I guess this was. It looks like it says 2013. 150. Well, yeah, 150 years at the top. I don't know. That's. But 80. Whatever. So, this is a recreation of the old subway that they used back when it was first opened up. So yeah, it's a modern picture. It's just done in black and white, and I like it. It's neat. The people in the background ruin it because they're British. No, but I like trains. So what are you gonna do? Ah, I do like this image though. Uh, Waiting on the station. I mean, that's why they call. I mean, the British called it the tube because it's just a tube. But this dude, because of the lighting, is just like a shadow man. All right, let's talk a bit about social mobility. We should be able to get a little bit more in before we finish up today. So, we had higher wages. Still waking up. New job positions, so many people were able to move up the social ladder. Middle class expanded, so we needed middle class lawyers, doctors, shopkeepers, that sort of thing. Now, the big thing behind this expanded middle class was education. That's super important, and I don't think it's just because this book is a textbook for a class, but like education is the main reason for all of this. Even the absolutist monarchs saw that having educated and loyal citizenry was important, but obviously it needed to be restricted and uh, allowed for a certain level in certain countries. And when I say obviously it needs to be restricted, I mean for the monarch, absolutist monarchs. Uh, Also, of course, it depended on the class, the child of. Try that again. The class of the child's family. So the upper class children had many more opportunities than those of the working class. If you were working class, you were probably put in a factory by the time you were, 8 or 9. Women also saw blah 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 blah. Also saw some improvement in their lots of life. Some were able to get jobs on their own. Uh, and the suffragettes pushed for the right for women to vote. I mentioned this. I mentioned this. I think it was last semester. Um, had a couple of students in my class who I knew would appreciate this. The suffragettes didn't play like that. I wouldn't say they were a major cause, but like they were an argument here in the United States. So I was like, oh, women shouldn't vote because the suffragettes were like they made their arguments cool, but also were more than happy to resort to violence when they felt it was necessary. And I feel like that's awesome. It's like, fuck it. If you guys aren't going to listen, if this is what it's going to take, cool. Let's go. And they'd go to town, and they were great. The British suffragettes were great. So here's some children having a wonderful time in school. At least they're sitting up and awake. This will be the time I would stare at a couple of you, but again, nobody's actually here. It's great. Nice bothering to show up to online classes. I might have to start using that Zoom thing and force y'all to actually be here. So here's some women working in a textile. Well, no, this isn't textiles. This is looks like they're metal filings of some sort. And another thing that was considered, women's work, but it was a middle class job, was notary. So, running the typewriters because their fingers were smaller and easier to run these stupid buttons. If you've ever used a proper typewriter, you know how awful those buttons are. Um, yeah, typewriters are pretty bad. Also, like when they're actually going at it, running these things, this is probably a loud room. Also, those are different types of typewriters. Huh. Also, one more tidbit. The QWERTY keyboard, the QWERTY keyboard that we have today, was made because of typewriters. Uh, the original key layout was apparently intuitive enough that people were typing too fast and it would jam up the typewriters. So they, and I mean, I guess by they, I mean the manufacturers or whoever decided the standardization, created a layout that was not intuitive, so it slowed down the people who were working on typewriters so they wouldn't just break the typewriters because again typewriters uh, are really finicky and kind of garbage. There's some votes for women, meetings, all that good stuff. They look harmless here, but so do small dogs. Here we go. Deeds, not words. Through thick and thin, when we begin, the bill, the whole bill, nothing but the bill. Arise, go forth and conquer. There on the right, I'm pointing at the screen. Uh, over here, yeah, they didn't play, y'all. For some reason, they've got what looks like French flags in the background. I don't know what that's about. Um, the suffragettes were great. They were really great. All right. The next should be my sculpture. Okay, so we're gonna stop here, because I want to discuss again, even though nobody's here, the test. So I'm going to put the test on Blackboard and uh, and put the test on Blackboard. You guys have until Tuesday to send me the answers, I guess. The way I've got it set up, it's written on the test. It's 9 questions, 3 from each chapter. It's essay based, like 2 to 3 paragraphs. Um, it's a is you looking at a larger topic and a larger section of the chapter than, who wrote such and such. So give me larger, more detailed ideas, facts, quotes. You're basically writing a very miniature paper for each. Obviously, you don't need to go out and get outside sources. Use your own knowledge and the book if you need to. I expect you to use the book because it's right here. It's going to show me how well you're able to use what information you've got. Because, again, they're opinion pieces, but you need to be able to argue your side. And just because they're opinion pieces doesn't mean there's not a wrong answer. There's not a wrong answer per se, but if you give me an answer and don't follow up with it well, you're not going to do well, is what I'll say. Well, I can't really give you an example, but, if I give you, hey, was Napoleon a good general, yes or no? And you say, yeah, he was a great general. He won all sorts of battles. The end. You're not getting crap on that. I personally think he was a good general. Yes, he won a lot of battles, but you need a little more than that. Give me some of the tactics he used. That crazy siege of see, I don't remember the name of it. I'd have to look it up. But that port, was it Toulon? It might have been Toulon. Where he was firing from the high ground onto the ships. That was nuts. Specific stuff that he did. For that example. So, yeah, that sort of thing. So, or if you want to say, no, I think he was garbage, then yes, tell me what he did wrong. He got his ships destroyed in Africa, and then he left his people behind, and then Russia happened. So, yeah. I'm going to put that up on Blackboard after my next class. I need to get these PowerPoints up on Blackboard right now, actually, and then get me a little bit of food before next class. And, I'll see you guys on Tuesday. If there might be one of you here. I'm going to need to do something to try to have people show up, though. But, yeah, I'll, see you guys later, hopefully. Hopefully I'll be getting responses in from the test because, you guys are going to have to do this test this way because it's the only way I can do it right now. Alright. See you guys later. Let me get my thing here. And, be safe. Hopefully, see you guys next Tuesday. Bye.